Hi, Phil Aston here from Now Spinning Magazine, and as promised, this is my review of Back to the Beginning, the Black Sabbath concert on July the 5th, 2025. I did quite a few videos on the build-up to this, defending it, but also being honest and open and my concerns about how it was going to unfold, my genuine concerns about Ozzy's health, and also what our expectations were going to be as fans, for those of us who've grown up with Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, for those of you just joining on this journey now as young people get into this form of music, and those of you actually older than me, who were there probably at the very, very beginning when the band were called Earth. And I decided I couldn't get a ticket. I live down in the far west of Cornwall in the UK. I'm originally from Birmingham, and Sabbath were a huge part, always have been a huge part of my life. I remember carrying this around at school in the early 70s because I was kind of like quite a skinny kid at school, and didn't get noticed or anything, and didn't want to get bullied and stuff. But you walk around with the Sabbath album under your arm. It was like a protective talisman. You could be, the kids got carrying a Black Sabbath album, the Black Sabbath album. They were kind of like a protective talisman. This was something special about this band. Absolutely superb. And then buying Paranoid on the single, and it's still one of the loudest vinyl singles ever made. And going to a little shop near Reddington's Rare Records because I wanted to get a Sabbath badge. I'd not seen them live, but this is about 1974, to wear this on my school blazer. So Sabbath are very, very important to me, and those of you who've seen the Black Sabbath videos on the Now Spinning Magazine YouTube channel or website, or you've seen me talk about them before, know how special and apprehensive I was about this concert. So I didn't get a ticket, but I decided to buy a ticket so I could stream it. And I haven't rushed to do this review. I actually watched the stream twice. The first time, just to immerse myself in the music and the way that the day unfolded and how I felt personally. And the second time, to make a few notes. And it did make a difference watching some of the performances a second time. So what I'm going to do is I am going to focus primarily on Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath, but I do want to touch on some of the other artists in the day because of how it made me feel, and also the little clips in between the bands being on stage, clips of Birmingham young artists, and in Birmingham itself, and the way they were talked about, and the way the camera panned across the crowd, and a lot of those vox pops that popped up on the screen as well, because I think all of that really built up to something. And Mastodon were the first band that opened, and everybody did a Black Sabbath song. Now, some people will say, well, Black Sabbath, there's so many different dimensions to you. And Phil, you yourself have always said, you can trust every single Black Sabbath album. You can. Saturday was all about Ozzy. There's a film being made behind the scenes, going out on Paramount later on, and this was all about Ozzy. So whatever your thoughts are that some of the bands should have done songs by the Dio lineup of Sabbath or Tony Martin, that was not going to happen. This was all about Ozzy Osbourne. This is a chance for Ozzy Osbourne to say goodbye and say thank you to all his fans, and for all his fans to see him on the stage for the last time. So everyone did a Sabbath song, and Mastodon did Supernaut, and it was really, really cool. It was a great version, and that part, obviously, in the song when we had those extra drums and such, that was Mario Duplantis, Danny Carey, and Eloy Carlson Gray doing that, and that was so authentic to that one of the best tracks from the Volume 4 album from 1972 by Black Sabbath. I thought they were great. I thought they really commanded the stage well. Rival Sons were up next. They did Do Your Worst and A Secret, great songs, and their Sabbath one was Electric Funeral. An unusual choice, perhaps, for them, especially I love Rival Sons. I think the vocalist, when I first saw them which was supporting Judas Priest and Queensryche, going back, gosh, about 9 years now. I think the vocalist had been studying every Robert Plant video he could ever see. But he's moved on a lot since then. And they're a great band. I must do more features on Rival Sons. But I thought he's commanded the stage, and the way he used the whole stage, it was a big stage, was just amazing. He looked like he was having an absolute time of his life. The whole band did. Anthrax were next, did Indians and Into the Void, one of my favourite Sabbath tracks. Hailstrom did Love Bites, So Do I, great track by them. Rain Your Blood on Me, and Perry Mason was their Ozzy contribution. Because it wasn't just Sabbath tracks that people did. I don't know how this worked. Maybe people were going to list and said, pick a song to do a cover of, and imagine everybody wanting to do the same ones, or you can't do this one because Ozzy's going to do it himself. Who knows? But it was really, really good. Lamb of God came up afterwards with some thunderous, really heavy metal with Laid to Rest, Redneck and Children of the Grave. And then to some of the highlights of the day for me, which was Supergroup A as it was billed. And this was The Ultimate Sin with Lizzie Hale from Hailstrom. She really belted this song out. Sue was sitting next to me and going, gosh, she's almost like got a voice of a bloke on this. She's having to really go. You could see the veins on her neck sticking out. I mean, she was really, really going for it. Absolute tremendous performance. Nuno Betancourt, a special mention for him, really, because he was on stage a lot, and I think he was quite late in the announcements that he was going to be involved, but he really was on stage, I felt, quite a lot. And what a superb guitarist. I mean, you may or may not know that he's been playing with Beyonce a lot, so what it must be like going from playing Drunk in Love to playing these kind of classic rock and metal songs, I don't know, but he looked like he was having the time of his life, and he looked like he was really, really lost in the music, especially on one of the tracks I'll mention in a minute. J.K. Lee was on this. I don't think they could find him straight away, but he pops up looking really, really cool, really well. Absolutely fantastic to see J.K. Lee on stage. David Elson, Mike Bordin, and Adam Wakeman. Adam Wakeman, of course, with Jazz Sabbath, his kind of side project, but he's worked alongside, the Sabbath guys a lot. And he's a tremendous musician, him and his brother Oliver, the Wakeman brothers, of course, and their dad Rick. I mean, absolutely master musicians, but he really was, that keyboard's adding just that right level of texture and extra dimension to the music. Shot in the Dark. This is David Draymond, J.K. Lee, David Elfson, Mike Borden, and Adam Wakeman. That was also fantastic. Sweet Leaf again was really good. Believer, again, more poor people coming on and off the stage here. And now to one of the highlights of the day for me, because it was such a surprise. I've been following an artist called Youngblood, who's really a pop rock kind of crossover artist, young guy in his 20s. He started his own festival called Youngblood because he's worried about the prices of festivals. I've seen him recently on stage with Billy Idol, and he's kind of like he's a return of the rock star frontman, really. The way he's developing as an individual, as a musician. He's a bit like Mick Jagger meets Dave Lee Roth meets Billy Idol. But he came on stage here, and I just had a feeling that most of the people in the arena didn't know who he was. Wearing a suit, looking very different, very young guy. And he came on and did Changes from Volume 4. Nuno Betancourt was on guitar, and this is where I felt Nuno was completely lost in this. And I feel that he was lost in it because of Youngblood's vocal performance on this song. It was incredible, and I have to think that I don't know how long the guy had known that he was going to be singing this song, how long he'd had to rehearse it, What I'm trying to say is, when you do a cover version, it's not karaoke. You have to, it can sound like karaoke if you're just going through the motions, you've just got the words, you're following an auto cue, whatever you're doing. But I mean, maybe this wasn't the case, but all I can say is that this guy was inside the lyrics of this song. His eyes were closed a lot of the time. He sang with such passion. You could see as the cameras panned across the arena that people were completely mesmerised and stunned by this vocal performance. And this is where I feel that Nuno's guitar playing at this he was also completely locked in, to Youngblood's vocal performance. It was what a voice. What a voice. He did this song so proud. And I think this was another, as the bands came on and songs like this were performed, you started to really tap into Black Sabbath, Birmingham, Ozzy Osbourne, Bill Ward, Geezer Butler, Tony Iommi. This whole thing, that everything that was on stage was because of these four. It was just absolutely amazing. And then we had complete change in direction with some really young musicians, really young kids, with Jack Black doing Mr. Crowley, which was a video segment. And it was joyous. It was joyous. And there were lots of moments where you saw really young musicians, saying how much Sabbath has kind of helped them and the music and everything. I was really, by this time, whatever my thoughts were, I just thought this is going to be a great day. This is celebrating stuff that means so much to me and has followed me and been part of me, the soundtrack of my life. A cliche saying, perhaps, but at times like this, it wasn't a cliche. It just meant so much to me. Next was Alice in Chains. God, they were good. Alice in Chains were just amazing, and they did Man in the Box and Wood, and they did Fairies Wear Boots. And one of the greatest tracks of Tony Iommi, that kind of blues shuffle, but they did such an amazing version of it. Absolutely amazing. Great vocals, great delivery, a classic song done with such respect again, absolutely fantastic. Gojira were next with Stranded, Severa, Mel Cooper, we had an opera singer on that for that one, which was Marina Viotti, and then they did a version of Under the Sun. And then we had a really exciting section, which I absolutely loved. It was called The Drum Off. And basically, it was Symptom of the Universe. Basically, the riff will be going round and round in circles. This is Nuno Bettencourt, Tom Morello. Great. I mean, he did a tremendous job. Really Sarzo on bass. He was having the time of his life. And we had Chad Smith, Travis Barker, and Danny Carey on drums. Each 3 drum kits on stage. Each of them taking like mini drum solos, but you could tell that this was about as rehearsed as somebody saying, can you go ahead and do this thing where we're going to do a drum trade-off? But you could see that they weren't quite sure who was going to do which beat when, and you could see that Chad Smith thinking, is it my turn or whatever? And you could also see some parts where they just about came back in time for the joining with the riff. There were smiles out on stage. It was just fun. It was musicians just having such a great time with this music and these riffs. I thought it was one of, I just couldn't stop smiling watching this. And so I watched the whole live stream twice. I just thought it was fantastic. And this is like, and now it's starting to get better and better and better. Supergroup B, Breaking the Law. Billy Corgan, I wasn't sure at first, thinking, what a choice, the Smashing Pumpkins guy. Obviously not dressed like you would expect a kind of metal musician to dress, because there's a look. You've never seen so many black T-shirts in one place at one time, perhaps. But it didn't matter whether his voice really was he's from a different world. Obviously, he loved this kind of music. He came through with grunge, but you could tell from his body language and the way he moved around the stage, he was having the time of his life. He was looking around and seeing he was with Tom Morello, he was with KK Downing, formerly Judas Priest and KK's Priest, Adam Jones, Rudy Sarzo, Danny Carey. You could just tell he couldn't believe the kind of people he was with. KK Downing played absolute blinder, fantastic guitar playing. Snowblind was next. Again, the same lineup. It was a great Sabbath song. And B. Corgan looks like as if he was partly On the stage or in the audience, he just looked like a fan. Couldn't believe that he was alive at a time to be in this position. But KK Downey was superb. And, and you looked across the audience, and the audience were just immersed in Snowblind. Next, Sammy Hagar comes on, one of my favourite vocalists. And then this has kind of been an easy song for him. It's a totally different range for Sammy. Flying High Again, from Diary of a Madman. Nuna Battencourt again, Adam Wakeman, Rudy Sarzo, Chad Smith, Vernon Reid. What a lineup. What a lineup. Vernon Reid, Chad Smith, Rudy Sarzo, Adam Wakeman, Nuno Battencourt, and Sammy Hagar. Absolutely killer. One of my favourite Ozzy songs. And, the melodies in Ozzy songs, you have to remember, everybody, when there's so many people coming up on their little vox pop saying metal, 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 metal is my life and everything, that Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne, that people talk about Sabbath being the Beatles of heavy metal, that's not a throwaway comment. One of Ozzy's tremendous talents was the fact he could create these melodies. Geezer would give him this set of lyrics, and Ozzy would come up with a melody. And a lot of Ozzy's music from the 80s had such fantastic commercial melodic lines, and Flying High Again is a typical example. Sammy Hagar then owned the stage with one of his own songs, which is called Rock Candy from the first Montrose album. Same lineup, brilliant track, absolutely fantastic. To actually see a Montrose song from one of my favourite albums ever, a Montrose song played at this Black Sabbath tribute, Ozzy Osbourne tribute, absolutely fantastic version. And then we head off even to more stuff with Bark at the Moon, Vernon Reid, Nuno Battencourt again, Alan Wakeman, Papa V. Petuia and Travis Barker. Absolutely great track. And then we go into some rock and roll. But again, we roll back to, this is about rock music. Remember that, Black Sabbath were a melting pot of jazz and blues and rock and roll. And here we have Ronnie Wood from the Rolling Stones, Steve Tyler from Aerosmith, looking absolutely incredible for his age. Nuno again, Bettenberg on guitar. He's playing absolute blinder. Tom Morello, Andrew Watt, Rudy Sarzo, and Travis Barker. This is rock and roll. Great, kind of slide guitar work, Gibson Les Pauls. Absolutely amazing. And then it gets even better when they do Walk This Way, and which segues into Whole Lot of Love. The Zeppelin number. Great lineup. Absolutely one of the highlights of another highlight of the whole day, really. Then we have Pantera, Cowboys from Hell, Walk, and Planet Caravan, which they've done before, but it's really fantastic track to see covered. Tool, 46x2, Hand of Doom, and Enema. Great stuff. And then another highlight for me is next with Slayer. It's my eldest son who's the biggest Slayer fan here at Now Spinning Towers. But I love their set. I love their set because it was just absolutely so intense, so heavy. I couldn't stop smiling throughout Slayer's set. They do Wicked World, which is such a great deep cut, isn't it, from Black Sabbath? And they managed to inflect and pour into it that jazz element of that track, jazz thrash. Is that a thing? It is now. But it's when they went to South of Heaven, Raining Blood, Angel of Death, and it's watching them, it's watching the intensity, watching the audience. That this is music and this is because of Sabbath. None of this could exist without Black Sabbath, but it's where it's gone to. I doubt even if Geezer, Tony, Bill, or Ozzy could have envisaged that their music would create this. But I think the guy, I can't remember his name, the singer in Slayer, you just watched his face, the way because his voice and his vocals, he was kind of not at odds with the music, but he has to deliver it in a different way so that it kind of separates itself. But you could see that in his face as he looked across the crowd, and he just looked so happy, so honoured so alive in that moment to think, gosh, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm part of this. You could sense it coming off the stage that these musicians was just so happy to be alive now. And across the audience, to see people, obviously my age and older, young kids sitting on shoulders. There's lots of girls there, young women, young guys from all around the world. You could tell people had travelled such massive distances, and they were just all together. You know, it was amazing. It was just so full of humanity in that stadium. After that, Guns N' Roses, who did a very brave attempt to literally just do Sabbath, 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 you know, Never Say Die, Junior's Eyes, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, Welcome to the Jungle and Paradise City. I think musically they were on form. I think vocally it was a challenge, I think, in some places, but they did a good job, and I think they obviously were there on time, and everybody had to do what they had to do. I thought they did well, and I was pleasantly surprised. Next, Metallica. Metallica were fantastic, and they opened with Hole in the Sky, which was amazing. Creeping Death, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and Johnny Blade from Never Say Die. I wonder how many of us played Never Say Die the next day because of how many tracks. Again, we've got to mention Guns N' Roses, Junior's Eyes from that album, and the next act doing Johnny Blade straight afterwards. But I think Metallica's final two songs, Battery and Master of Puppets, was where it really, really came together for them. And they quite rightly said that without Sabbath they wouldn't exist. They just wouldn't be there. But their performance was just full of authority, full of power, full of passion. And again, the thing is with a lot of these bands, and especially Metallica, is they're fans. They're fans of these guys, which Lemmy, Ozzy. They are fans. They are they respect and really love the music that inspired them to create their own brand of music, and that really, really came across. Afterward, there was loads of things on the screen going on here. With showing what's going behind the stage, having all the photographs taken and everything. And then it was time for Ozzy Osbourne. And there were clips of from around Birmingham, young bands, young musicians, how Birmingham's been influenced by Sabbath, what Sabbath means to everybody. And it really kind of made me feel that it brought it back to what it meant to me, walking the streets as a teenager and going into my first pubs and stuff, and where I worked as an apprentice, and what this music meant to me really, and the fact that to see that there's so many young people, it's really become a thing, and see all the pictures of Sabbath around Birmingham, and the Sabbath Bridge and everything. I never would have envisaged anything like that, but it really made me feel good. And then Ozzy came on. We had the kind of the orchestral stuff that comes in, it prepares you for him. The band are there, and we knew he was going to come up and be on a seated throne. But what were my expectations? My expectations had gone as low as he'll be there. He might just be shouting, "Let's go effing crazy," and "I love you all," and a raft of guest vocalists will actually sing the songs, but he'll be there on stage. But that was not the case. Yes, he was seated in his throne. The guy has Parkinson's and multiple other health issues. But you know what? I felt his voice was absolutely fantastic. I really did. The way he started with "I Don't Know," that guy, Zakk Wylde. I mean, the guy is such a brilliant guitarist. He's the perfect foil, isn't he, for Ozzy's music, and Adam Wakeman was there again. And again, this is another example where you have this almost Beatlesque melody lines in the songs. And when it goes to that quieter part, I thought Ozzy sang it so well. And yeah, he's having a glass of water, he's got a cup of tea on stage, and he's spraying in mouth to keep everything going. And you imagine how he must have felt. how nervous going up to seeing all those people. You could just feel for him, and he's lifting his arms above his head. Now think about this. This is a man who's 76. How many of us, if we were 76, could go on stage at that time of night and do this? He's got Parkinson's and everywhere else, and all the bolts in his neck and everything. How tiring this must be. And he's singing with all his heart. And the band are behind him, the audience is behind him. I'm completely caught up in this now. I am completely caught up in it. The next song is Mr. Crowley, and Suicide Solution comes in after that. And there's a part when he talks. He doesn't just go from one to the other. He's not thinking, I just got to get through this. I don't know how I said yes to this. And he says, I just want to say that my wife has worked so hard in getting this together. He loves Sharon. He absolutely loves his wife and family, and there's so much negativity out there. You saw her every so often, obviously in the wings and stage, but she's done this and she's done it for Ozzy to say goodbye. And while Ozzy's on, there were lights around the Aston Villa ground saying Ozzy. This is all about Ozzy saying goodbye. It's like a living memorial, not waiting until the musicians passed away, but for him to do this. And he said, I think at this point he said he's trying to think of the words to say. You can see that he's so emotional. And he said, I've been laid up for 6 years, man. You just don't know what it's like, what it's been like. And he pauses for a second, and me and Sue just looked at each other, and we started to tear up, and the cameras panned across the audience, and you could see everyone's eyes were welling up, of all ages, that, how much this means to Ozzy Osbourne to have been there at this point in time. And the fact he's singing so well, and you can see he's struggling. You can see he's struggling. Every so often he tries to stand up. He's frustrated. He wants so much to be able to just do what he used to do. But his voice is holding up. And I do Mama, I'm Coming Home. And I think if he'd done Ordinary Man, I think everyone would have just melted into a puddle of tears, to be honest. But Mama, I'm Coming Home was so poignant to, here he is, all these four lads born within the shadow of the Aston Villa ground in Aston, and here they were coming home. It was just beautiful. Yes, you're seeing a guy who's physically really struggling. The amount of effort that must have gone into this, which we'll see in the movie. But I was thinking how tiring this must be. How's he doing this? And trying to sing as a vocalist, those of you sing, you have to stand up, you have to open your diaphragm to breathe from the belly. He's literally sitting down. How hard that is to do that, how tiring that is to do that. And then if we have the last song, so there are 5 tracks here, 5 songs, all immaculately played and sung. And Crazy Train, of course, which is played at every Aston Villa match. It's literally an anthem for Aston Villa, let alone Ozzy or a whole generation of people, whether you were there or you're there now. And I think the other thing that was so beautiful about this is that while this was playing, they had Randy Rhoads on the screen. Literally, they'd almost time synced it to Zakk Wylde's guitar playing. I thought that was a really, really lovely touch to show you just how much Randy Rhoads still means to Ozzy, and and those first 2 Ozzy albums. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was absolutely amazing, and the audience sang it. I thought his voice was great, and you realise just how much the Ozzy Osbourne back catalogue is full of amazing songs. With amazing choruses, middle eights, and whatever else. Great melodies. And I thought it was fantastic. And then there was one act to go, which was Black Sabbath. And I did wonder whether, because of Ozzy had been kind of like, you could tell he was nervous, drinking water, a cup of tea, spraying his mouth, and trying to get everything together. What it's like when you you do something and you build yourself up, and then you go off for a break, and then you come back. Now, this could be, I'm talking to you musicians or people you. What I'm saying, imagine you're doing something, you may be doing something physical, and then you go and sit on the sofa for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then you have to go back out and capture what you've just done. How many of us think, it's kind of like having, those of you who are playing bands and you have a break, and then you go back after the break, or you're getting ready to do a talk, and then there's a lunch break, and then you come in afterwards, and it takes you longer. I did think, he's going to come, the adrenaline will be going, but now it will have come down a bit because he's used all that energy, and now he's got to go back for the final part of the day to being Black Sabbath. This is a tall order. And again, all this and all the singing, he's going to be tired. We'll be able to notice. When he came back for Black Sabbath, there might have been a smidgen at the very beginning where he looked in his face. There was the excitement of being on stage and being amongst people that love him in Ozzy. And this, he looked more as if it was, I've got to hold this together. I've got to hold this together. And his voice, there's only 4 songs now. And some of you might say, there should have been more songs. It's about Black Sabbath. This is a venue where there's a curfew. The Aston ground sits in amongst lots of houses, and I imagine for them wanting to do more festivals in the future, there's a line where they cannot cross, without losing their license. And you have a day like this, and a band loses 5 minutes here, 2 minutes there, 7 minutes there. The main band that's going to be impacted is going to be the final band, because they can't have any extra time. It could be there was nothing else rehearsed, whatever else, but there were 4 songs, and they were the 4 songs I thought they would do, and I bet we all did, didn't we? War Pigs, and the way it started, the tolling of the bell, taken obviously from the first album, and then the air raid sirens taken from Paranoid itself, and the lighting, that song is Black Sabbath. War Pigs, isn't it? You could say, well, shouldn't it? The Black Sabbath song is Black Sabbath? No, War Pigs. But the way that the world is now, when you read the news and you see the news, War Pigs is the anthem for the young. It was the anthem when I was young, and it's the anthem now for young people. War Pigs. It's as relevant as anything else. And to just see, you've got to remember, there are 3 instruments on that stage, excluding Ozzy. This isn't like 2 guitars and keyboards, and this is 1 guitarist, 1 bass player, 1 drum kit. No keyboards. It's just that. And you realise what absolutely amazing musicians, and how the kind of jazz, kind of swing influence and blues influence of what they do makes them so unique. Geezer Butler's bass playing fills the frequency range in every direction, making it sound like there's got to be more one person doing that. And then Tony Iommi's guitar, that's one instrument, because normally in this situation, when the guitarist takes the lead, the whole bottom end drops out, and there's no middle at all. It's just bass and guitar appear. Sabbath never have that. It's just a solid wall of sound, played immaculately. And I have to mention the guy that wasn't there when they last did their farewell tour, which was Bill Ward. It was amazing to see him back on stage. I think he played absolutely brilliantly. And again, it can't be easy for Bill. He hasn't been on stage in front of that many people for years and years and years. He's had heart attacks. Keeping your fitness up is really difficult. The pressure, this has been filmed. It's going to be released later on. God, just leave me alone. He did really well. They all did well. And think about Ozzy here. He's sitting in a chair. He's having to try and do this and feel it, and how he must have felt. Because you could see at this particular set, he did try and stand up several times. The frustration in just, God, I just wish I could do this. And it's also more difficult, I think, because he's out there in front, and Geezer and Tony are slightly behind him. He can't see the band. He can't feed off them. It can't have been easy. I just felt. I think that's the. Sometimes you go and see a concert and you're kind of just feeling the music, and you paid your money and you want to be entertained. I think for me personally, watching this, I felt an emotional connection, investment in them. I loved all the other musicians and stuff, but I felt there were elements of my life replaying. The amount of times I've heard War Pigs, where I was, what I was doing, and seeing these guys do this, and how important this song is, and to know this is the last time they'll do it in this situation, and how powerful it sounded to hear War Pigs on July the 5th, 2025, to when I first heard it, when I was like 12, and how powerful it felt then. It's been. I think it's amazing if you're 19, you've heard this for the first time, because I hope it feels like it did when I first heard it. But when it's been part of you for like 50 plus 60 years, it's kind of always been there. It's like the sun in the sky. Anyway, sorry. And the next song was NIB, which was really powerful, great riff. And again, Ozzy's voice matched it perfectly. The whole band, the swing from Bill Ward's drums was there. Amazing. Iron Man was next after that. Probably the definitive heavy metal song in a way, because it's a riff that's so heavy, so angular, and the vocal line follows the riff exactly. It's probably the one of the songs I've talked about, Ozzy and his kind of Beatlesque melody lines, but this one is just really following the riff. But it's got so many different parts to it, and of course the bit where it gets faster and all the rest of it. And there's lots of room for this song, more than you realise. For some amazing bass playing from Geezer Butler, great guitar playing from Tony, completely in command of his instrument, and Bill Ward again. I just think the chemistry between them, and how they must have felt following all these tremendous musicians, but it's fantastic. And then they could only really finish with one song, couldn't they? Taken at a slightly slower speed, I imagine, to help Oz, was Paranoid. And when you watch this, those of you who've even learned how to play it, you watch how Geezer Butler plays bass on this. It's like it's got the heavy metal version of John Entwistle, isn't it? It's like an orchestra on the bass. It's just, he plays. It's just amazing. Because Geezer is a guitarist, so there's that element to him as well. But Tony Iommi played the solo without As You Know It from the single, and it was great. And then it was done. Oh, and this, when you're watching the live stream, and a lot of people who were very quick to get their reviews in talked about the fact that when the band finished, it all, the fireworks went off, and Ozzy was left out front, and Geezer and Tony seemed to go over and smile at each other and then disappear. And you can see Ozzy turned around and said, "Get the beep back on stage." And you think, what's happened? And they haven't come forwards to do the bow they've always done since they're first together. So did they want to just get off the stage? No, it was just a bit of really bad editing. Obviously the person doing the editing thought, oh, look, fireworks. And what you missed is this bit, this picture I'll bring up screen now, is where they disappeared because they went to get a cake to present to Ozzy, and then they came back and shook his hand. And I think Ozzy says, "Tony, I love you, man, and love you, Geezer." And they were together as friends from Aston, knowing that this was the last time they would be on stage. So actually, it was just a bit of model editing that gave the impression that something was not quite right, when actually it was so right. It really was. So that was Black Sabbath, and that was Ozzy. That was Back to the Beginning on July the 5th. What is my lasting impression of this? My lasting impression was seeing the effort that Ozzy put into trying to stand up, to do his best to, and I felt for him. And I think everyone in that arena felt for him. Everyone watching felt for him. This isn't a cash grab. This was way beyond. This is a movement. This is, I listen to all types of music, but whatever I listen to, whether I'm listening to classical music, jazz or soul or pop, whatever it is, I grew up on rock and metal. And when I ever see this, this is the core of where I'm from. I'm from Birmingham. I grew up with this stuff. And Black Sabbath was in the machines of my apprenticeship. I used to work around Aston. I worked at the GEC building and Halliday's drop forgings, and you could hear the metal in the hammer machines. I think, as Rob Halford said, you could smell the metal in the air. You could the kind of furnaces and stuff. And so there's a lot of, especially things like Sweet Leaf, you could actually hear the machines almost playing this music. And so it really brought that home to me. And the other thing was the love towards this band, towards Birmingham, the youth of the audience, the joy, the tears, the people literally sobbing in enjoying what they were experiencing. So I felt like I was seeing the future, and the future of rock and metal was all there to see. You're seeing these older musicians, but you're also seeing younger musicians, and you're seeing in the Vox Pops little videos and clips that have been sent in from fans around the world that there's a whole new generation of people. I think somebody said, I think it was in Digbeth, like an art sense, someone said, oh, the thing is, you think Sabbath is like, the typical Sabbath fan is a bloke in his 60s. Well, that'll be me. But it's not. Because a lot of people that are into Sabbath and metal are young now, and it's like an attitude. And it is. I felt absolutely great about that. I actually put in my notes, I felt proud to be a Brummie, proud to have been around at the time when Sabbath first appeared, and proud to be around now. I'm so lucky to being able to watch this and feel this, and to see that the future of rock and metal music is going to go forward. This music isn't going to go anywhere, and they can't. It is the end. Ozzy struggled to do this. If they'd waited a few more months, perhaps he couldn't have done it at all. And how he must have felt the next day. And let's think about this. The man has got Parkinson's and lots of other issues. He put so much effort into this, everybody. He put so much effort into this gig that I bet the next day he couldn't move. And he probably can't even move now. He's probably on tons of medication just to try and control the pain that he's put himself through by doing this. He probably numbed it out to get through it, and now he's probably going to take a long time to try and get back to where he was. And so my love for you, Ozzy, goes out to you. It goes out to Geezer, to Tony, to Bill. The effort you put into this to make this work, and for all the musicians and all the bands that made this work, and all of you attended this concert and were lucky enough to get tickets, and all of you streamed it around the world, and all of you sent messages in and shared pictures. It's an amazing thing to be part of, and I'm so pleased that I've experienced it. So thank you, Geezer. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Ozzy, for all the music. This is normally where I now start waffling on about subscribing to the channel and all the wonderful things you can do. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just going to let this hang there and say thank you to Black Sabbath, and thank you to all the bands that took part in this momentous occasion, and especially to you, Ozzy. Take care, and to Sharon and your family. Thank you. And for all of you who've managed to watch to the other end of this, take care, all of you. Remember, music is the healer and the doctor. And I'll see you on my next video.